So, bridging the valley of death, right? So this is a great way to start a presentation. Hopefully we'll end differently. The valley of death is not a new concept. It's really where outgoing capital is outpacing incoming capital, right? So the real key here is that we try to help our startups understand how to best utilize the limited funds that they do have to, increase the rate of climb out of the valley. And so we'll talk a little bit about how we do that. Minimum viable product has already been mentioned today. Is kind of the backbone of our process and backbone of our theory by which we help them do that. So I think there is, in fact, as we talk about this, there is hope in the valley. So this is a kind of a very general graph on these funding stages. They're not stages, they're not milestones. It's in fact kind of a fluid path, but I want to talk about each one of these stages individually. The first stage is they're in the incubator. They're still in that warm, cozy university environment, and they're probably working on a lot of theoretical models. They probably have some physical models, but we kind of categorize this as they're evaluating, they're proving the physics behind their device, their IP, their technology. So now they're out of the incubator situation, and now we've got to start creating this physical embodiment that will go from really the physics, improving these physical characteristics, to being applied toward a healthcare need, to a medical situation. And so the idea here is to create as little as possible from an expenditure standpoint that will highlight the highest value attributes. So sometimes these prototypes can be just very simple individual subsystem breadboards. They're really trying to prove this physics aspect of the product, but applied towards something. So it may be applying different pulse rates or different sensing techniques. And if you break these down into the individual subsystem components, that really kind of gets you to the point where you're not, where the unknowns to your potential investors, whether it's grant juries or VCs or angels, it starts to remove some of these unknowns and it makes it more viable. Sometimes as you move along that path, they get a lot higher fidelity. They start to look like more finished type products, but they're still fairly rough at this point. And the order of magnitude of cost over an integrated system breadboard or something that's going into manufacturing for production is so significantly lower that you're talking about a few weeks to turn these things around in some cases, and you're working on a very iterative kind of path. Sometimes it can be a lot lower fidelity. Sometimes we've had a couple of, we actually help some of our startups go out and do some of this fundraising. So we'll be part of their entity as they talk about the value of their technology, and they kind of want to understand these financing entities want to understand how does this work fit into a workflow. We don't want to be a technology in search of a need. It really needs to work in a way that is effective. It cuts system costs. Certainly, the number one thing now is the downward pressures and costs at all levels. I don't need to tell anybody here that. And so, sometimes there's very quick and very inexpensive ways to illustrate some of these things. So you get to the next step, and you're going from minimal feasible concept. You've established the feasibility. Now we get to the more familiar term of minimum viable product. And so again, spend as little as possible, but you develop it far enough to really prove that it has clinical effectiveness. So you go from pulse rates out of a device to actually debriding tissue. This top right device here is a grasper thermal device and thermal ligature device, and it's not pretty. It certainly wasn't ergonomic, but it was used to seal porcine tissue and vessels in the animal lab, and it proved that clinical application that it was viable and it worked. So at this point, you're kind of you get back into the full product development. Your development path may follow much more of a traditional path of an established organization. This is where the big money is. Kind of want to talk about a few things about raising capital. And so if you can prove that your technology doesn't just have this one application, like the technology for Brightseed, once you were able to do a few other things with it, you could branch out into other areas. You're not a one-trick pony. You got multiple points of payoff to be potentially huge. 510K versus PMA, slight cost difference. So Brightseed actually hired a FDA consultant, and It was about $10,000. They say it was the best $10,000 they've ever spent, because the consultant was able to tell them, if you do a couple of things different in your development path, you're definitely going to qualify, with an equivalency. And so PMA isn't a deal breaker to a startup, but certainly if you can prove a 510K path, you're going to have an easier road. Reimbursement code, again, a different company that we have in our membership spent about $2,000 just to help understand where they needed to be with reimbursement codes. And again, if you can qualify for an existing code, you are way down the path already. Think about your harvesting strategy. Your investors are in it to make money. There's multiple strategies. Growing the company is one. That may be the most difficult. Harvesting it by an outright sale, but look at maybe short-term, exclusive licensing deals that can spark some initial cash, and then go to longer-term, broader licensing deals. So again, show the investors that you've thought about multiple ways to ultimately harvest the business. So apply for as many grants as possible. So finally, just kind of summarizing, what I've been talking about here. Really try to use your dollars well. This is a marathon. Get to the next funding point. Get to those checkpoints, those way stations. Refuel. Don't think about commercialization from the get-go. So constantly be looking that way. And I think that the results will be clear. You start thinking about being agile, making constant course corrections, and I think your futures will be right for sure.